and welcome back to this short video series where I am breaking down chronology into smaller composite parts. This is episode number 4 where we'll be focusing on concurrence. Please make sure you've watched episodes 1, 2 and 3 because this is designed to build on that. The format will remain relatively unchanged, but I will be using a couple of varied timelines to show how concurrence plays a role in some of the periods of history, especially at Key Stage 2. It is possible to introduce this concept further down school, but personal opinion wise, I prefer to introduce it once children are more familiar with scale, duration, intervals, etc. What I'll do is I'll quickly load a PowerPoint, as I have done before. Concurrence. That's where two or more events or circumstances are happening or existing at the same time. And as I said to you before, I'm going to make use of the concepts we've discussed, such as duration, interval, scale, etc., and show how this builds on those. Here you can see our overall narrative timeline. You'll be pretty used to it by now, I'm sure, broken into British and world history. The reason I break it into British and world history is to allow concurrence to be more deliberately represented. So let's quickly bring in those periods of history. You'll notice that ancient Egypt is concurrent with the Roman Empire and also British prehistory. Here are the other earliest civilizations that we have to study as part of an overview. You'll notice that they are all concurrent with British prehistory, and it shows that these parts of the world were much more advanced than Britain at that point in time. The reason I get them to disappear then is because in this particular timeline I am emphasising the relationship between the Roman Empire, ancient Egypt and Greece. On this timeline I'm going to be making links between a later point in history, but I want to reinforce that narrative that we've mentioned before, that clear sequence of periods of history, to ensure children know the relative position. In this particular timeline, my emphasis is going to be linking the Vikings, Anglo-Saxons and the Abbasid Caliphate, which is the early Islamic history. The reason the scale on the timeline is really helpful here is because I can accurately depict A, the duration, and B, the fact that they existed at the same points in time. But this is not the extent of chronology that I personally teach in Upper Key Stage 2. I will also start to look at how they interacted with each other, and that is the subject of the next video. Okay, now just a quick summary. Concurrence can be introduced earlier in school, but I prefer to embed periodisation, scale, etc. before introducing and then emphasising concurrence. Concurrence establishes that multiple timelines exist at the same time, but does not say they met. That is what I'll be covering in the next video, as I mentioned before. Concurrence can be evident in either the overall narrative, which is the examples I showed, or the internal narrative. The perfect example for that is the Anglo-Saxon and Viking conflict, where you'll have singular events that impact on both the Viking and Anglo-Saxon timeline. Concurrence can be used to compare different groups because of a common event, a theme, or a concept. And there we go. So that's concurrence. Concurrence is an interesting concept to explore, and you might think it does come up in year 2 because we study, I don't know, let's say Florence Nightingale and Mary Seacole. But be mindful about, do children fully understand the steps before it? If the answer is no, I'd possibly choose to stress those before we move on to concurrence and have a really interesting comparison of the timelines. In Key Stage 2, as soon as the children have been introduced to the Roman Empire, the idea of concurrence will come up because of their links to the Greeks and the Egyptians and the Brits. Hope that makes sense. Please do give the channel a subscribe, and it'd be great if you leave a like or a comment. There is one more video in this particular series which is on interaction, and that is about next week. Thanks very much. Bye.